Hello, everyone. This is Morgan Hay, and you're listening to Late Night Radio Tales. Tonight, as I sit here in my small wooden studio amidst the whispering pines forest, outside the window, darkness reigns and the wind howls. The temperature has dropped to 10°C, and my old heater is making a steady rattling sound. Perhaps it's just old, much like the stories I'm about to tell you. This week, my inbox was flooded with emails and letters from all over the world. Some wrote from Tokyo, from Bangkok, from Manila, from big and small cities across Asia. And I noticed something intriguing. Many of you have had strange, terrifying experiences at late-night eateries. Is it because as night falls, the boundary between this world and the next becomes thinner? Or is it because these dimly lit, sparsely populated night restaurants create the perfect space for things that don't belong to us to appear? I don't know the answer, but I do know that tonight, we will explore those stories together. Real stories from real people who experience them at night eateries scattered across Asia. Tonight's first story comes from an email I received last Tuesday afternoon. It was a 7-page email, written in English, from someone who introduced herself as Soy Kim. She's a Korean-American exchange student who had lived in Seoul for 3 years. In her email, she wrote, "Morgan, I don't know if I should be telling this story. 2 years have passed, but I still can't forget. Every night before I sleep, I still see her face. I still hear her voice. And I know that no matter where I live, no matter how far away I go, I will never dare to step into another late-night restaurant again." This is Soy Kim's story. It all began one night in November 2022. I was a final-year East Asian Studies student at Yonsei University in Seoul. Autumn that year arrived late, and the city still had strangely warm days in mid-November before winter truly set in. I lived in a small apartment in the Sinchon district, near the student quarter. My life in Seoul was quite simple: attending classes, working part-time at a cafe, and occasionally meeting up with my group of fellow foreign friends. I had a habit of staying up late to do homework, write essays, or sometimes just sit on my balcony looking down at the bustling street below. That night, I was up until 2:00 a.m., finishing an essay on modern Korean literature. My stomach started rumbling. I had skipped dinner to focus on my work. Looking out the window, I saw that most stores were closed, except for a few convenience stores and a small noodle shop on the corner, which still had a faint, yellowish light filtering through its transparent plastic curtain. I had never noticed that shop before. How strange, I had lived in this area for 2.5 years, walked past that corner every day, but had never realized there was a restaurant there. Perhaps it didn't open during the day, or perhaps I simply never truly paid attention. Hunger urged me on. I put on my jacket, grabbed my wallet and phone, and headed downstairs. The streets of Seoul at 2:00 a.m. had a peculiar beauty, deserted but not quite desolate. There were still a few drunk people stumbling on the sidewalks. A few taxis whizzed by, and the neon lights from storefront signs were still glowing even though the shops were closed. The noodle shop was about 50 meters from my place. As I got closer, I saw it clearly. A small, old shop with a faded Korean sign that read Kukjip Noodle Restaurant. A few of its light bulbs were out. A transparent plastic curtain covered the entrance, but I could faintly see someone inside. I pushed the curtain aside and stepped in. The interior was small and warm, with only about 6 tables, all made of old orange plastic packed close together. The yellow paint on the walls was peeling in many places. Old photos, perhaps of the shop from decades ago, hung on the walls. An old television in the corner played some music program at a very low volume. What struck me most was the smell, the rich aroma of broth, garlic, onions, and fermented soybean paste. It all blended into a scent that was both familiar and strange. It was the smell of old Korean eateries, those that had existed since the war and had kept their recipes for so long. There were only 3 customers in the shop. 2 middle-aged men sat at a table near the door, drinking soju and eating noodles. They spoke in low voices, occasionally chuckling, and at the very last table sat a woman. I only glanced at her then, a woman in a pale blue traditional hanbok, with her back to me, her head bowed to the table. Her long, black hair was neatly tied back. It seemed a bit odd for someone to be wearing a hanbok in a casual diner at 2:00 a.m., but I thought perhaps she had just come from a party or an event. "Hello, dear?" A cheerful voice rang out. I turned and saw an old woman standing behind the counter, smiling at me. She must have been about 70, with snow-white hair and a face full of wrinkles, but her eyes were bright and gentle. She wore a thick sweater and an apron stained with grease. "Hello, Grandma," I replied in Korean. "You're still open." "Ah, you want a bowl of noodles?" "Of course." Grandma smiled, her voice clear and deep. "Sit down, I'll cook it for you right away." I chose a table in the middle of the shop, not too close to the two drunk men, and not too close to the woman in hanbok. I sat down, placed my phone on the table, and looked around. Now, observing more closely, I realized how truly old this shop was. The plastic tables were stained with age. The tiled floor had many cracks. On the walls, besides the old photos, there were yellowed newspaper clippings pasted up as a kind of peculiar decoration. I glanced at the woman in hanbok. She remained still as a statue, not moving at all. In front of her was a bowl of noodles, but she didn't seem to be eating. Steam from the noodles rose, blurring the space around her. "You're from America, aren't you?" Grandma's voice startled me. She was standing by my table with a hand towel, smiling gently. "Yes, that's right," I nodded. "How did you know?" "I can tell," she chuckled. "You're different from Koreans, and the way you sit is different too. Are you studying in Seoul?" "Yes, I'm studying at Yonsei." "Very good," Grandma patted my shoulder gently. "Study hard, dear. I'll make you the best bowl of noodles." She returned to the counter. I heard the sound of a knife chopping onions, water boiling, and a pan sizzling. In the shop, the two men had paid and left, leaving only me and the woman in hanbok. I took out my phone, intending to scroll through Facebook to pass the time. But for some reason, my phone signal was very weak that night, showing only one bar and nothing would load. I tried turning on Wi-Fi, but the shop either didn't have Wi-Fi or it had a password I didn't know. So I just waited. The lights in the shop were dim, the TV was playing some old ballad, and I started to feel a little cold. Even though it was quite warm inside, I glanced at the woman in hanbok again. She was still sitting motionless. From where I sat, I could only see her back, but I had a strange feeling that she wasn't breathing. Her chest didn't rise and fall. Her long, black hair didn't stir, even when a gust of wind from the door came in as someone passed by outside. I tried not to look at her anymore. Perhaps I was just tired and imagining things. Grandma placed a large bowl of noodles in front of me. Steam rose, fragrant and inviting. The delicious aroma made my stomach nearly scream. The bowl was full of white noodles, topped with a boiled egg, fresh herbs, kimchi, and a thin slice of beef. The broth was clear, with a few drops of sesame oil shimmering on the surface. "Thank you, Grandma," I said, picking up my chopsticks. "Eat quickly, dear, or the noodles will get soggy," she warned, then returned to her counter. I began to eat and had to admit Patricia was right. It was the best bowl of noodles I had ever eaten in Seoul. The broth was rich but not greasy. The noodles were chewy and fragrant. The egg was perfectly cooked, with a slightly runny yolk. I ate ravenously, forgetting all my fatigue and stress from studying. When I was about halfway through the bowl, I heard a sound from behind me. I looked up, glancing into the mirror hanging on the wall. The woman in hanbok had turned her head, and she was looking directly at me. I felt my heart stop. Her face was unforgettable. Her skin was as pale as snow, her lips devoid of color, and her large, dark eyes, had no light in them. She stared at me unblinkingly, her face utterly expressionless. A chill ran down my spine. I quickly turned my face away, trying to continue eating, but my hands were trembling. I put down my chopsticks, trying to breathe deeply. "What's wrong, dear? Not good." Grandma was standing beside me, looking at me with concern. No, it's not that," I stammered. "The noodles are delicious, it's just Grandma, that woman over there." I pointed towards her table. Grandma looked in the direction I pointed. "Ah, you mean Min." Who is she, Grandma?" Grandma looked at me and smiled a strange, sad, sympathetic smile. "She's a regular customer of mine. She comes here every night." Every night." "Yes, she's been coming here every night for 20 years. 20 years? I swallowed hard. The woman looked only about 30 years old. If she had been coming here every night for 20 years, that would mean. "Grandma, she..." "Eat, dear," Grandma interrupted me, her voice still gentle but with a hint of urgency. "Finish your noodles, don't let them get cold, and don't look back at her again." Grandma patted my shoulder gently and returned to the counter, leaving me alone with my noodles and the rising panic in my heart. I tried to continue eating, but the food now seemed to have lost all its flavor. I felt as if someone was watching me. A gaze focused intently on my every move, unblinking, unwavering. I didn't dare to look back. I just kept my head down, trying to eat quickly, swallowing each mouthful of noodles in a hurry. Only one thought was in my head: finish eating, pay, and get out of here. But then I heard a sound, the scrape of a chair on the floor, soft, slow footsteps. Someone was approaching me. I held my breath, not daring to move. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow standing next to my table. The shadow was tall and slender, wearing a pale blue hanbok. The woman had come right beside me. "Dear," a soft, almost whispered voice floated into my ear. It sounded like the wind sighing through tree branches, like dry leaves rustling. It had no warmth of a living person. "Do you see him?" I didn't dare to look up. I just stared at the bowl of noodles, my hand clutching the chopsticks, trying not to tremble. "Dear, do you see him?" she asked again, her voice this time more urgent, almost pleading. I still didn't dare to answer. "He said he would come pick me up. He promised he would come, but I've been waiting forever. I've been waiting for 20 years and I still haven't seen him." I felt something touch my shoulder, a hand as cold as ice. Even through my thick jacket, I felt that chilling cold to the bone. "Dear, can you help me find him?" I couldn't take it anymore. I sprang up, the chair scraping back with a crash, and I turned to run towards the door. But that hand was still gripping my shoulder, cold, strong, pulling me back. "Don't go, dear, don't go. You can see me, you can help me." "That's enough, Min," Grandma's voice rang out, startling me. She was standing between me and the woman, one hand on the woman's chest, pushing her back. "You promised me, you're not to bother the customers." "But Grandma, I just want to find him. I just want to ask if she can see him." "Min, you know," Grandma said, her voice both stern and compassionate. "But you mustn't do that. Go back to your seat, eat your noodles, like every night." Min stood still, looking at me with her bottomless dark eyes. Then slowly, she turned, walking slowly back to her table. Each step made no sound. She sat down, turned her back, and bowed her head to the bowl of noodles as if she had never left her spot. Grandma turned back to me, her wrinkled face full of weariness. "Go home, dear. I'm sorry, I didn't think she would." "Grandma," I interrupted, my voice trembling. Is she?" "She's dead," Grandma said flatly, without hesitation. 20 years ago, right here in this shop." The room spun. I felt my legs weaken, having to lean on the wall to stay upright. "She was a bride," Grandma continued, her voice lower. "On her wedding day, before going to the ceremony, she stopped by here for a bowl of noodles. She said she loved my noodles. She said after she got married, she would move to Busan with her husband, so she wanted to eat them one last time." Grandma paused, looking towards Min. "But her husband never came. She waited at the wedding hall all morning. Then she got the news that he had died in a car accident on his way to the ceremony. She ran out of the wedding hall, still in her bridal hanbok, ran to the accident scene, but he was already dead." I swallowed, my throat dry. She came back here, still in her hanbok. She sat at that table, ordered a bowl of noodles, and waited. She said she would wait for him. She said he had promised to come pick her up. She didn't believe he was dead. Then she took medicine," Grandma said. "Right here in front of me. I couldn't stop her in time. She drank an entire bottle of sleeping pills and then laid her head on the table as if sleeping. When the ambulance arrived, she was already gone." I felt tears streaming down. I didn't know why I was crying. Perhaps because of the sorrow in the story, perhaps because of the fear, or perhaps because I knew that from this night on, everything had changed. "Since then," Grandma said, "every night she comes back here, sits at that table, looking out the window, waiting for her deceased husband to pick her up. I can't chase her away, I can only let her stay here. She doesn't harm anyone, she just sits there and waits." But why tonight did she?" "Because you saw her," Grandma said. "Most people don't see her, they just see an empty table, but you can see her and she knows it. She longs for someone to see her, for someone to hear her story, for someone to help her." I shook my head. I can't help her." "I know," Grandma said, her voice gentle. "No one can help her. She has to help herself. She has to accept that the person she loved is gone and they can't be together again, not in this world." Grandma reached out and wiped the tears from my cheeks with a cloth. Go home, dear, forget this shop. Don't come back here. Not because it's dangerous, she doesn't harm anyone, but because you are alive, you have a future ahead of you. Don't let yourself get caught up in someone else's past. I nodded, speechless. I took out my wallet, pulled out some bills, and placed them on the table. No need, dear, Grandma said. I won't take your money, just get home safe. I didn't argue, I just wanted to leave. I turned towards the door, but before pushing aside the plastic curtain, I turned my head to look at Min one last time. She was still sitting there, her back to me in her pale blue hanbok, head bowed, her long hair hiding her face. And on the table, the bowl of noodles was untouched, steam still rising faintly as if it would never get cold. I stepped out of the shop, onto the cold streets of Seoul. The night wind blew, but that cold was nothing compared to the chill I had just experienced. I ran back to my apartment, not daring to look back. That was the first night, but it wasn't the last. In the days that followed, I tried to forget the noodle shop and the woman named Min. I focused on my studies, did my homework, met up with friends. I never walked past that corner at night. During the day, when I passed by, I saw the shop closed, its sign unlit, and I wondered if it truly existed. But then, a week later on another night, when I was again staying up late to finish a major assignment, hunger struck. And this time, I couldn't resist the curiosity. I wanted to know if the shop was still there, if Min was still there. I went downstairs and walked towards the corner. And just as I suspected, the noodle shop was still there, its yellow light dim, the plastic curtain gently swaying in the night breeze. This time, I didn't go in. I just stood outside, looking through the blurry curtain. I saw Grandma standing behind the counter, her white hair neatly tied up, smiling at some customer. I saw a few people eating noodles, and at the very last table in the darkest corner of the shop, I saw a figure in a pale blue hanbok, sitting with her back turned, head bowed. Min was still there, sitting at her table, waiting as she had waited for 20 years. I stood there, watching her for a long time, a mix of emotions swirling within me, fear, pity, and a nameless, deep sadness. I never spoke to Min again, but I knew she was there. Every night, when I looked out my window, I could see the yellow light from the noodle shop, and I knew she was sitting there, in her bridal hanbok, waiting for someone who would never come. 2 years later, when I graduated and left Seoul, I walked past the noodle shop one last time. This time it was daytime and the shop was closed. The old sign was faded, a few light bulbs broken. On the door was a small paper note, written in Korean characters, open from 10:00 p.m. to 4:00 a.m. I stood there for a moment, then took out my phone and snapped a picture. Not because I wanted to remember the noodle shop, but because I wanted to remember Min, a bride who was never married. A ghost who never found peace. I don't know if she's still there now. I don't know if Grandma is still alive. I don't know if the noodle shop is still open. But I know one thing. Every time I eat noodles, no matter where I am, I will remember her and I will pray. Pray that one day she will find peace, that she will stop waiting, and that she will rest. That was Soy Kim's story. After receiving her email, I tried to find out more about that noodle shop. I contacted some friends in Seoul, asked them to check the Sinchon area, and they told me there was an old noodle shop there, just as Soy described, open at night and run by an old woman. But when they asked about Min, the old woman just smiled and didn't say anything. Is Min still there, or has she found peace? I don't know, and perhaps we'll never know. But this story makes me think about one thing. How many souls like Min are trapped in this world? How many people have died but cannot leave because they are still clinging to a promise, a hope, an unresolved pain? And how many of us, when we step into a quiet late-night eatery, have sat next to one of those souls without even knowing it? This is Morgan Hay, and you're listening to Late Night Radio Tales. We've just heard the first story in tonight's special theme about night eateries in Asia. But don't go anywhere. Many more stories are waiting. After this short message, we'll return with the next story from a late-night pho restaurant in Hanoi, where not all customers are still alive. Stay with us. Are you still there? Good. This is still Morgan Hay, and the clock in my studio shows 11:30 p.m. Outside, the rain has started, not a heavy downpour, just tiny droplets, enough to create a steady symphony on the wooden roof. I like that sound. It makes me feel safer, even though I know the stories I'm about to tell are anything but safe. Before we continue, I want to thank the listeners who called in during the break. Especially David from Portland. He told me about a strange cafe in Bangkok he once visited. I've noted it down, and perhaps in the coming weeks, we'll have a chance to hear his story. But for now, let's return to tonight's theme. In the previous segment, Sarah told us about Min, the bride who was never married, still sitting in a noodle shop in Seoul, waiting for someone who would never come. A sad story, wasn't it? But the next story is different. It's not just sad, it's terrifying in a way I can't describe. This story comes from a handwritten letter. Yes, you heard that right. A real letter written in blue ink on white paper sent through the postal service. In an age where everyone uses email, receiving a handwritten letter made me a little uneasy. The letter had no sender's address, just a scrawled line in the corner of the envelope. From Hanoi, with regret. The writer introduced himself as Thomas Brennan, a 32-year-old Irish English teacher. He had lived in Hanoi for 4 years, and in his letter he wrote, "Morgan, I don't know if you'll believe me, but I need to tell this story to someone. I need someone to know what I did, and I need to warn everyone. If you're in Hanoi, if you pass a small pho restaurant on Tun Duc Thang Street with a sign that says Ko Ba Pho Restaurant, please never step inside after midnight. Don't, no matter how hungry you are." This is Thomas Brennan's story. I arrived in Hanoi in August 2019 after signing a contract to teach English at a language center in the Old Quarter. I was 29 at the time, had just broken up with my long-term girlfriend in Dublin, and decided I needed a fresh start. Vietnam sounded far enough away to forget the past. I rented a small apartment on Hang Bong Street on the 3rd floor of an old tube house. The room was cramped and hot in the summer, but I liked it. From the window, I could look down at the bustling street with motorbikes constantly whizzing by, with street vendors carrying goods on their shoulders, with the clang of their wares mixing with car horns. My teaching job was quite simple. I taught evening classes from 6:00 p.m. to 9:00 p.m. Afterward, I would often wander through the Old Quarter, drinking *bia hoi draft beer with other foreign teachers, or simply sitting at a sidewalk cafe, observing Hanoi's nightlife. Hanoi at night had a peculiar beauty, unlike Seoul or Tokyo with their dazzling neon lights. Hanoi was calmer, more ancient. Yellow lights from old houses. The chirping of cicadas in the green trees, the fragrant smoke from the tobacco pipes of old men sitting on the sidewalks. Everything was slow, relaxed, as if time moved slower here than elsewhere. I loved this city, and I thought I could live here forever, until the night I met Ko Ba. It was a night in October 2020. I remember it very clearly because it was my 30th birthday. Some friends had invited me out to eat and drink, but I refused. I wanted to be alone. I don't know why, but turning 30 made me feel strange, as if I was standing on the border between youth and adulthood, between what had passed and what was to come. I finished my last class at 9:00 p.m. and walked home. But on the way, I decided to detour around Hoon Kiem Lake, just to walk and think. It was getting chilly. Hanoi's autumn wind had started to blow, and the air smelled of dry leaves. I walked along the lake shore, listening to the wind rustling through the ancient trees. There were a few young couples sitting on benches, hand in hand, a few old people exercising. And me, a 30-year-old man walking alone, not knowing what I was looking for. When I left the lake and headed towards the Old Quarter, I realized I was lost. I turned into a small, unfamiliar alley with old, cramped houses and dim lights. I was about to turn back, but my stomach started to rumble, and I smelled the fragrant aroma of broth, beef, green onions, lime, and chili. That smell led me deeper into the alley until I saw a small pho restaurant nestled at the corner of a narrow street. The sign was simple, Ko Ba Pho, written by hand on an old wooden board. The restaurant had only about 5 small plastic tables placed right on the sidewalk. There were no customers, just an old woman sitting on a low plastic chair, fanning herself with a paper fan. "Hello, sir, would you like some pho?" she called to me in Vietnamese. I hadn't learned much Vietnamese then, but I understood that sentence. I nodded, walked over, and sat down at a table. The woman stood up, and I saw her clearly for the first time. She must have been over 70, thin, slightly hunched, with silver hair neatly tied back. Her face was full of wrinkles, but her eyes were bright and sharp. She wore a black ba ba asterisk, traditional Vietnamese top and pants, black trousers, and old rubber sandals. "Are you a foreigner?" she asked, this time in English with a heavy but clear accent. "Yes, I'm from Ireland," I replied, a little surprised. "Ireland, huh?" she chuckled. So far away, what do you do in Hanoi? I teach English. A teacher, very good, a noble profession. She nodded. Do you want beef pho or chicken pho? Beef pho. All right, I'll cook it for you right away. She turned into the shop, which was actually just a tiny space with a gas stove, a few large pots, and an old refrigerator. I heard her bustling in the kitchen, the sound of boiling water, chopsticks tapping against a pot. I sat there looking out at the alley. It was strange, the alley was completely deserted. No one passed by, no motorbike sounds, no one talking, only the steady chirping of cicadas and the wind blowing through the power lines above. Do you eat late at night like this often? She had placed a large bowl of pho in front of me. Steam rose, fragrant and inviting. The bowl of pho was perfectly beautiful. Soft white noodles, thinly sliced beef, chopped green onions, and plenty of fresh herbs. Beside the bowl was a plate of lime, chili, and raw vegetables. Sometimes, I said. Today's my birthday, so I wanted to walk alone. Birthday, ah, she smiled. How old are you? 30. 30, she laughed loudly. Still so young. I wish you good health and good luck and eat this pho, I cooked it especially for you. I thanked her, picked up my chopsticks and began to eat. And my God, it was the best bowl of pho I had ever eaten in my life. The broth was rich, sweetly savory from beef bones simmered for hours. The meat melted in my mouth. The noodles were chewy but not hard, the green onions fresh, the herbs fragrant and cool, everything blended perfectly to create a flavor that made me want to cry. Is it good, dear? She asked, sitting back on her plastic chair, smiling at me. It's delicious, I said, my mouth still full of pho. I've never eaten such good pho. I've been cooking pho for a long time, she said, with a hint of pride in her voice. Since my parents' time, it's been 70 years now. 70 years? I was surprised. So that means since 1950. Yes, she said. I was only 5 then, helping my parents sell pho on the sidewalk. Then, when my parents passed away, I continued to cook. Until now. I was silent, feeling the weight of that story. 70 years, an entire life tied to a small pho restaurant. Do you have a family yet? She asked. No, I shook my head. I just broke up with my girlfriend. Oh, too bad, she said, her voice genuinely sympathetic. Don't be sad, I know, she said, her voice dropping a little. I once loved too. When I was 18, a good boy, smart, planned to study abroad in France. He promised to marry me when he returned, but he never did. He died there in an accident. I looked up at her, her eyes staring into the distance, as if looking at a distant past. From then on, she continued, I never loved anyone else, I just cooked pho. Every day I cook and I wait. Wait for what? I asked. She looked at me and smiled a sad smile. For him to come back. I know he can't come back, but I still wait. Every night I open the shop, I cook pho, and I hope that one day he will walk in here, sit down, and say, Koba, 1 bowl of pho for me. I didn't know what to say, just felt a sadness rising in my heart. But enough, she waved her hand as if dismissing those thoughts. Eat, or your pho will get cold. I continued eating, but now each mouthful of pho felt heavier. I thought about her story, I thought about her loneliness. I thought about how she had spent her entire life waiting for someone who would never return. When I finished, I asked her how much. She said 50,000 VND. I took out a 100,000 VND note and handed it to her. Keep the change, I said. Thank you for the delicious pho, and thank you for telling me your story. She took the money, looking at me with misty eyes. Thank you, dear, she said. You're kind, I wish you find happiness. I stood up, bowed to her, and walked towards the alley exit. But before turning the corner, I looked back one last time. She was still sitting there on her plastic chair, fanning herself with the paper fan, looking towards the street as if waiting for someone. 2 weeks later, I returned to that pho restaurant. I tried to find the alley again, but strangely, I couldn't remember the way. I wandered through the old quarter all evening, looking for the Koba pho sign, but I couldn't find it anywhere. I started to think I had remembered wrong, or perhaps the shop had closed. But I couldn't forget that bowl of pho. And I couldn't forget Koba, the old woman who had spent her life waiting for a lost love. Then one night, when I was again walking through the old quarter around midnight, I accidentally turned into an alley, and I smelled pho. I followed the scent and found the restaurant. It was indeed Ko Ba Pho restaurant, with the same sign, the same plastic tables, and the old woman sitting, fanning herself with a paper fan. "Hello, dear," she saw me, her face radiant. "You've returned, I'm so happy. Come sit." I sat down, feeling as if I had come home. "Are you well?" she asked. "Well," I nodded. "Are you well, Grandma?" "Still the same," she smiled. "When you're old, you're not well. But as long as I can still cook pho, I'm happy." "I tried to find this restaurant," I said, "but I couldn't find it. Today I just happened to stumble upon it again." "Oh," she smiled a strange smile. "My shop is hard to find. Only those with destiny can find it." Destiny? The word sounded odd, but I didn't ask further. She cooked me a bowl of pho, this time even more delicious than the last. And we talked about life in Hanoi, about Ireland, about family, about memories. She told me about wartime, about the days Hanoi was bombed, about how she still managed to cook pho for soldiers, for the poor. From that night on, I started coming to Ko Ba's restaurant regularly. 2 or 3 times a week, I would seek out the shop around midnight, sit and eat pho and talk with her. And I noticed something strange. Every time I came, there were no other customers, just me, as if the shop only opened for me. "Why are there no customers?" I asked her one night. "There are," she said, "but not many. People now prefer big, fancy restaurants. A small shop like mine, few people know about it. But every time I come, it's just me." She looked at me silently for a moment. "Because you come at the right time," she said. "At other hours there are customers, but at this hour, only special people come." "Special people?" She nodded. "The person I'm waiting for." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What are you talking about, Grandma?" She smiled a sad smile. "It's nothing, dear. I'm old, just rambling. Eat, your pho will get cold." But from that night on, I started to feel something wasn't right. By November 2020, I had been to Ko Ba's shop nearly 30 times, and strange things began to happen. The first time I realized something was wrong was when I got home after eating pho. I looked in the mirror and saw that my face was pale. Not just tired, but sickly pale. My lips were dry, my eyes sunken, my cheeks hollow. I thought I was just overworked. I took vitamins, tried to sleep more, but my condition didn't improve. I was getting thinner and thinner. My colleagues asked if I was sick. I said no, just tired, but the truth was I felt like I was fading, as if the energy in my body was slowly being drained. Every morning I woke up feeling more tired, weaker, as if I had aged 10 years overnight. And I realized that every time I went to Ko Ba's shop, my condition worsened, but I couldn't stop going, as if some force was pulling me back to that restaurant. Every night when the clock struck 11, I felt an intense craving rising within me, a craving for Ko Ba's pho, for her stories, for the peaceful atmosphere of the small shop. And I went, even though I knew it was killing me, I still went. One night in December, I went to the shop as usual, but this time something was different. Ko Ba was sitting at a table, not on her usual plastic chair. She sat there, chin in hands, staring intently at me. "Hello, Grandma," I said. "Sit down. Hello, dear," she replied, but her voice was no longer cheerful as before. Her voice was serious, a little sad. "Are you well?" she asked. I was about to say I was well, but the words caught in my throat. I looked down at my hands, bony, dry skin, prominent knuckles. I looked like an old man, no longer the 30-year-old me. "No," I admitted. "I'm not well. I don't know what's wrong with me." She looked at me in silence, her eyes full of pity. "You shouldn't come here anymore," she said. I looked up shocked. "What?" "You shouldn't come here anymore," she repeated. "Go home and never come back." "Why, did I do something wrong?" "No," she shook her head. "You didn't do anything wrong, it's my fault. I shouldn't have kept you here." "Kept me here? What are you talking about?" She stood up and walked closer to me, and for the first time I saw her face clearly under the dim light, and I saw no shadow. Ko Ba had no shadow. I looked down at the ground at where she was standing. The light cast shadows of the table, shadows of the chair, but no shadow of her. "You've found out, haven't you?" She smiled sadly. "I knew you would know sooner or later." I backed away, the chair scraping loudly. Grandma, you're..." "I'm dead," she said, her voice eerily calm. I died in 1989. My heart stopped right here in this shop while I was cooking pho. I couldn't breathe, the room spun. But you're still here and you're still cooking. Because I'm still waiting, she said. I'm still waiting for him, the man who promised to marry me, and I can't leave until he returns. But he's already dead, I said, my voice trembling. Yes, she nodded. He died in 1963 in Paris, but I didn't accept it. I thought if I kept cooking pho, kept waiting, one day he would come back. I looked at her, not knowing what to say. And then you came, she said, looking at me. You, a young, lonely man looking for something. You were kind, gentle, and you listened to me, just like him, so much like him. I swallowed, feeling fear rising. I thought maybe he had returned. Maybe he had reincarnated as you, and I started to keep you. Every time you ate my pho, I took a little of your life force. Not much, just a little, but enough for you to slowly weaken. I stood up, my legs trembling. Why did you do that? Because I was lonely, she said, tears streaming down. Because I had waited too long, because I didn't want to be alone anymore. I wanted someone to stay with me, even for a little while, and you made me feel warm, you made me feel like I was still alive. I shook my head, backing towards the door. I have to go, I can't stay here anymore. Go, she said, her voice desolate. Go and don't come back, live your life, find your love, don't be like me. Don't waste your whole life waiting for someone who's already gone. I turned and ran out of the shop, ran through the alley, ran to the main road, ran until I could no longer hear the cicadas, no longer smell the pho. I ran home, locked the door, and sat on my bed, trembling uncontrollably. And I cried out of fear, cried out of loss, and cried for Ko-ba, the woman who had spent her entire life and even her death waiting for a lost love. I left Hanoi in May 2023. Not because of Ko-ba's restaurant, I never went back there after that night, but because I couldn't live there anymore. Every time I passed through the old quarter, I felt afraid. Afraid that I would smell pho again. Afraid that I would be pulled back to that restaurant. Before returning to Ireland, I tried to find Ko-ba's restaurant one last time, not to eat pho, but to say goodbye, to tell her that I understood. I understood her pain, and I was sorry I couldn't stay. But I couldn't find the restaurant. I walked all over the old quarter, through every alley, every street. But Ko-ba's pho restaurant was nowhere to be found. Perhaps the shop only appeared at certain hours, perhaps only to those with destiny. Or perhaps after she let me go, she found peace and the shop disappeared. And that was Thomas Brennan's story. After receiving the letter, I tried to verify it. I have a friend living in Hanoi, and I asked him to look for Ko-ba's pho restaurant on Tun Duc Thang Street. He said there was no such restaurant. He asked the surrounding vendors. They also said they had never heard of Ko-ba. But there was an old woman selling fruit. When asked, she was silent for a moment and then said, there was an old pho restaurant many years ago, but it closed a long time ago. The owner died in the 80s. They say she died of a heart attack, never married, lonely all her life. I asked what the owner's name was. The old fruit vendor said people called her Ko-ba. Pho, a simple Vietnamese dish, but behind each bowl of pho are stories. Stories of love, of loss, of waiting. And sometimes, those stories never end, even when the storyteller is gone. Outside the window, the rain has grown heavier. I hear the wind blowing strongly through the trees. And in that moment, I find myself thinking, if there's an eatery out there in the darkness with a dim light and an owner waiting, are they waiting for me? This is Morgan Hay, and you're listening to Late Night Radio Tales. We've just heard the second story in our special theme about night eateries in Asia, but the night is still long. After this short break, we'll continue with a story from Manila, Philippines, where there's a wonton noodle shop open day and night, and not all of its customers want to leave. Stay with me. Excuse me, everyone, please wait a moment. It seems we have a call waiting on the line. This is Morgan Hay, Late Night Radio Tales. Where are you calling from? Hello, Morgan. I'm Maria Santos. I'm calling from Toronto, Canada. Hello, Maria. It's good to hear your voice. Are you all right? Your voice sounds. I'm not all right, Morgan. I've been listening to your show since the beginning of the night, the story about the noodle shop in Seoul, then the pho restaurant in Hanoi. And I think I need to tell my story. I need someone to know before. Before what, Maria? Before I go back there. because I know I will go back no matter how hard I try. Maria, would you like to tell your story to me and to everyone listening? Yes, I need to. All right, take a deep breath, Maria, and tell me. We're listening. Thank you, Morgan. My story begins 2 years ago when I was still living in Manila. I was born and raised in Manila, Philippines. My family wasn't wealthy, but not poor either. My father was a taxi driver. My mother sold clothes at the market. I have 2 younger sisters. We lived in a small house in Quezon City, a noisy, crowded but vibrant area. In 2022, when I was 26, I worked for a BPO business process outsourcing company in Makati, Manila's financial district. My job was to answer calls for an American insurance company. I worked the night shift from 9:00 p.m. to 6:00 a.m. due to the time difference. The night shift in Manila has its own culture. Hundreds of thousands of people work at night in tall office buildings, answering phones, processing emails, working for companies in the US, Australia, the UK. And around those buildings, an entire ecosystem thrives. Night restaurants, cafes, convenience stores, all open 24/7 to serve people like us. One of the places I frequented was Mang Thomas Mami House. Mami is the Tagalog word for wonton noodles, a popular street food in the Philippines. Mang Thomas's shop was on a street corner near my office building, open day and night, never closing. Never. I started going there in March 2022. I had just started working 3 months prior, still getting used to the night shift schedule. My body was tired, I suffered from insomnia during the day, and I was always hungry around 2:00 a.m. in the middle of my shift. One night, a colleague named Patricia invited me to eat during our break. We walked down the street, and she led me to Mang Thomas. "This is the best noodle shop in the area," Patricia said, smiling brightly. "And it's open all the time, so whenever you're hungry, you can come." The shop wasn't very big, about 15 tables packed close together in a cramped space. The yellow paint on the walls was old and peeling in many places. Old photos hung on the walls, photos of Manila from decades ago, photos of politicians, famous people who had visited the shop. An old television in the corner was always on the news channel. Behind the counter was an old man, about 60, short and a little chubby, with salt and pepper hair and a cheerful face. That was Mang Thomas, the owner. "Patricia, madagal na ha," he called out, waving. "Mabuti ka ba, mabuti Mang Thomas," Patricia replied, pulling me to an empty table. "Ika-apat na this time." Mang Thomas looked at me, smiling broadly. "Welcome, Maria, you may, I will make you the best mommy in Manila." We sat down. The shop was quite busy even though it was almost 2:00 a.m. There were a few groups of young people, probably also working BPO like us. There was a man in a suit sitting alone, staring intently at his bowl of noodles. There was an old couple holding hands, eating noodles together. "This place is famous," Patricia said. "Mang Thomas has been cooking noodles since 1985, almost 40 years now. He says he never closes, not even on Christmas, New Year's, or during typhoons. The shop is always open." "Always open?" I asked. "So when does he sleep?" Patricia chuckled. "I don't know either, but every time I come, no matter when, he's always here, as if he doesn't need to sleep." Mang Thomas brought 2 bowls of noodles for us. The bowls were large, full of yellow egg noodles, clear broth, plump wontons, shredded chicken, green onions, and some greens. Steam rose, rich with aroma. "Kine," he said, "eat while it's hot." I began to eat and had to admit Patricia was right. It was the best wonton noodle soup I had ever tasted. The broth was rich from long-simmered chicken bones. The wonton filling was tender and perfectly seasoned. The noodles were chewy and delicious. Everything was perfectly balanced. "Good?" Patricia asked, looking at me with a smile. "Absolutely delicious," I nodded enthusiastically. And from that night on, I started coming to Mang Thomas's regularly. Every shift around 2:00 a.m., I would go down to the shop, order a bowl of noodles, and eat in silence before returning to work. It became a habit, an anchor in the long days of night shifts, and I started to become familiar with the other regulars. There was Carlos, a man about 35, always in a white shirt and tie, even at 3:00 a.m. He always sat at the corner table, looking out at the street, eating his noodles very slowly as if contemplating something profound. There was Alina, a woman about 50 with dyed red hair, always carrying a large handbag. She always arrived around 1:00 a.m., ordered a bowl of noodles and a cup of coffee, and sat reading a book. There was Vincent, a young man, perhaps only 20, with long hair tied in a ponytail. He always came with a laptop, sat at a table near the power outlet, working while eating his noodles. And there was the old couple, Mr. and Mrs. Reyes. They always arrived around 3:00 a.m., sat together, holding hands, eating noodles in silence. Sometimes they smiled at each other. Sometimes they just sat there looking at each other with a deep understanding that only people who have lived together for many years possess. We didn't talk much to each other. We were just strangers sharing a space in the strange hours of the night. But there was a silent bond between us, as if we were members of a secret club. People who knew about Mang Thomas Mommy House. People who came here when the world slept. Then one night in May 2022, something changed. I arrived at the shop as usual around 2:30 a.m. The shop was still as busy as ever. Carlos was at the corner table, Alina was with her book, Vincent with his laptop. But I noticed a new person, a young girl about 20, sitting at a table near the door. She looked strange, not strange in a bad way, but strange in an out-of-place way. She was wearing a beautiful, colorful floral dress and red high heels. Her hair was carefully curled, her makeup perfect, as if she had just come from a party. But her face was deathly pale, and her eyes stared straight out the window, unblinking, as if waiting for someone. In front of her was a bowl of noodles, but she wasn't eating, just sitting there looking out. I sat down at my table, placed my bowl of noodles, but my eyes kept glancing towards the girl. Something about her made me uneasy. "Mang Thomas," I called softly. "That girl, is she all right?" Mang Thomas looked towards the girl, then back at me. His face looked sad. "She's all right," he said in a low voice. "She's waiting." "Waiting for whom?" He didn't answer, just shook his head and returned to the kitchen. I tried not to look at the girl anymore. I ate my noodles, but they didn't taste as good as usual. There was a strange feeling in the shop, a heavy, sad feeling, as if the air had become thicker. When I finished eating and was about to leave, the girl suddenly said, "Sister." I started, turning around. She was looking at me, her dark eyes devoid of light. "Yes," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Do you see him?" she asked. "He said he would come pick me up. I've been waiting for him since 8:00 p.m. What time is it now?" I looked at the clock on the wall. 3:00 a.m., I said. 3:00 a.m., she repeated, her voice distant. "He's 7 hours late. Maybe he's stuck in traffic. Manila always has traffic." I didn't know what to say. "Yeah," I nodded, "probably." "Are you going home now?" she asked. "I'll just wait." The girl smiled, a sad smile. "Yes, I'll wait." I walked out of the shop, feeling a chill run down my spine. The next night, the girl was still there, sitting in the same spot, wearing the same floral dress, with the bowl of noodles still untouched in front of her, still looking out the window, waiting. I asked Patricia about her. "Do you see the girl in the floral dress?" I pointed towards her. Patricia looked in the direction I pointed, then looked back at me with a confused expression. "What girl? That table's empty." I was startled. "What, you don't see her? She's sitting there, wearing a floral dress, curly hair." Patricia looked at me as if I was crazy. "Maria, there's no one there. Are you all right? Are you sleep deprived?" I turned back to look. The girl was still there, clear as day, but Patricia didn't see her. That's when I realized no one in the shop was looking at the girl. Carlos ate his noodles, looking out at the street, not paying any attention. Elena read her book, not looking up. Vincent typed on his laptop, not glancing over as if the girl didn't exist. But I saw her clearly. In the following nights, I started to notice more strange things. Carlos, the man in the white suit, I never saw him leave the shop. Every time I came, whether it was 1:00 a.m., 3:00 a.m., or 5:00 a.m., he was always there. Sitting in the same spot, eating the same bowl of noodles, looking out at the street with a thoughtful expression. One night I decided to talk to him. "Where do you work?" I asked, sitting down at the table next to him. He looked at me, surprised that someone was talking to him. "I work at BGC," he said, his voice tired. Bonifacio Global City in finance, or I don't remember anymore. Are you on your way home from work? No, he shook his head. I'm on my way to work, or I think so. I stop here to eat noodles. But for some reason, I can't leave. Every time I stand up intending to go, I sit back down. I don't know why. I looked at him feeling a rising fear. How long have you been here? I asked. He was silent for a moment. I don't know, maybe a few hours or a few days or a few months. I don't know anymore. Time here is not like outside. I stood up, backing away. Do you need any help? He looked at me, smiling a sad smile. No, nothing can help. You should go home, you shouldn't stay here long. I wanted to ask more, but he had turned back to look out the window as if I were no longer there. Another night, I talked to Alina, the woman with red hair. What book are you reading? I asked. She looked up and smiled. Ah, a novel. I'm looking for a passage. A passage I read many years ago, but I can't remember which page it's on. Have you been reading it long? A long time, she nodded. I've read this book countless times, but I still haven't found that passage. Maybe I remembered wrong, maybe the passage doesn't exist. I looked down at the book. It was an old, yellowed novel. Do you come here every night? I asked. Yes, she said. I come here after I finish work, or I think so. I don't remember what my job was anymore. But I remember that I like to come here, sit and read, eat noodles, so I just keep coming. Where do you live? She was silent, looking out the window. I don't remember anymore, she said, her voice distant. I think I used to know, but now I don't remember anymore. Every time I try to remember, everything becomes blurry. I felt goosebumps rise. You don't remember where your home is. She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. Dear, there are some things it's better not to remember, because when you remember, you'll have to face the truth, and the truth is sometimes too painful. She bowed her head, continuing to read, but I was no longer there. I started to get scared. Scared of Mang Thomas's shop, scared of the customers there, but I couldn't stop coming. Every shift around 2:00 a.m., I felt an intense urge. I had to go to the shop, I had to eat noodles as if an invisible rope was pulling me back there. One night I decided not to go. I stayed in the office, trying to work, trying to ignore the hunger. But the hunger grew, becoming an intense agony. My stomach felt as if it was being squeezed, my head was spinning, my hands and feet were trembling. Finally, I couldn't bear it. I ran down the street, ran towards Mang Thomas's shop. When I walked in, Mang Thomas looked at me and smiled sadly. Balik ka na, he said. Alam, you're back, I know. I sat down, panting. I tried not to come, I said, but I couldn't. Why can't I stay away from this shop? Mang Thomas placed a bowl of noodles in front of me. Kasi anak, he said softly. Kasi ika amin. Because, my child, because you are one of us. I looked at him, startled. What did you say? I'm one of you here. What do you mean? He sat down at the table opposite me, looking at me with sad eyes. Maria, he said, when did you start coming here? March, I said. May 2022, and what month is it now? What year? I was about to say 2022, but suddenly I hesitated. 2022, right? He shook his head. It's August 2024, Maria. You've been here for 2 years. The room spun. I shook my head hard. No, that's impossible. I've only been here for a few months. I still work, I still live at home, No longer, Mang Thomas said, his voice full of compassion. You no longer work, you no longer live at home. You are only here. Every night you come here, you eat noodles, and you think you're going to work. But in reality, you just wander around and come back here. I couldn't breathe. No, that's not right. I remember going to work. I remember. What do you remember? He asked softly. Do you remember the last day you were truly alive? And suddenly, images flooded my mind. One night in May 2022, I left the office at 6:00 a.m. It was already light. I was tired and wanted to go home to sleep. I called a taxi. I sat in the back seat, the driver talked to me, but I was too tired to answer. I closed my eyes. Then there was a loud honk, a scream, the sound of metal crashing, glass shattering, then darkness. And when I woke up, I saw myself standing on the sidewalk, looking at the wrecked taxi. There was blood on the glass, there were screams, someone was lying motionless in the car. And I thought, I'm so lucky I got out of the car before the accident happened. But that wasn't it. I didn't get out of the car. I was still in the car. The person lying there motionless was me. I looked at Mang Thomas, tears streaming down. I'm dead, I whispered. I'm dead, aren't I? He nodded silently. Yes, you passed away in that accident. A drunk driver drove into the wrong lane and hit a truck. You and the driver both died instantly. But why am I here? Why haven't I? Haven't I gone somewhere else? Because you haven't accepted it, he said. You haven't accepted that you're dead, so you return to the last place you felt truly alive, this shop. And you keep reliving the same night, the same shift, the same bowl of noodles forever. I looked around the shop. Carlos was still sitting there, looking out at the street. Elena was still reading her book, Vincent was still typing on his laptop, the girl in the floral dress was still looking out the window, waiting. They too? I asked. They're also dead. Yes, Mang Thomas nodded. Carlos died in an accident on his way to work. Elena died of a heart attack while taking a taxi home after her night shift. Vincent died of an overdose in his apartment. The girl in the floral dress, her name is Angelica, she died on her way to a birthday party, hit by a motorbike. And they all came here. Yes, they all came here in the last hours of their lives, and they couldn't leave. I looked at Mang Thomas. What about you, Mr. Thomas, you too? He smiled a sad smile. I died in 1995, Maria, a heart attack right here in this kitchen. But I couldn't leave because I still had work to do. I have to cook noodles for people like you. People who have died but haven't accepted it. People who are still hungry, still longing for the feeling of being alive. I have to give them a place to return to, a place to feel normal, even for a moment. I burst into tears. I don't want to die, I'm too young, I still have so many things I want to do. My family, they're waiting for me at home. I know, my child, Mang Thomas said, placing his hand on mine. His hand was as cold as ice. But you have to accept it, you have to let go, because if you don't, you'll be trapped here forever like the others. I don't know how, I said. I don't know how to. Eat this bowl of noodles, he said, pointing to the bowl in front of me. Eat and remember your life, remember the people you loved, remember the happy moments, then say goodbye, and go. I looked at the bowl of noodles. Steam still rose, fragrant and inviting. But this time I didn't feel hungry anymore. I picked up my chopsticks and began to eat, and with each mouthful I remembered. I remembered my mother, who always cooked for me every morning before I went to my night shift. I remembered my two younger sisters, who always laughed and called me their big sister. I remembered my father. He always worried about me whenever I worked nights, always texting me to ask if I had gotten home safely. I remembered Patricia, who first brought me to this shop. I remembered the nights we laughed during breaks, telling each other funny stories about difficult customers. I remembered all the small moments, the moments I thought were unimportant. But now I realized they were my life. And I realized I had lived, I had loved, I had been happy. And now I had to go. Morgan, I'm in Toronto now. I immigrated a year ago. I'm trying to start my life over. But every night around 2:00 a.m., I find myself wanting to go back to Manila, wanting to go back to Mang Thomas's shop. And I'm afraid that one day I will actually go back, and that time I won't be able to leave again. I don't know if my story is real. Maybe I imagined it all. Maybe I was just overworked and hallucinating. Maybe that accident never happened. But I still remember Mang Thomas's cold hand. I still remember the sad eyes of Carlos, of Elena, of Angelica. And I still remember the feeling when I ate that last bowl of noodles. The feeling of saying goodbye to an entire life. Morgan, if anyone is listening, and if they've ever been to Manila, I want to say one thing. If you find Mang Thomas Mommy House, a noodle shop open day and night, don't stay too long. Eat your noodles and go home. Don't let yourself become a part of that place. Because some places, no matter how warm and safe they seem, are not for the living. They are for those who have passed on, those who haven't accepted it, those who are still hungry for the feeling of being alive. And once you become a part of that place, you will never truly leave again. I'm sorry, Morgan. I can't say anymore. I just wanted someone to know before I. Maria, are you still there? I think we've lost the connection. You've just heard Maria Santos's story, told live over the phone on our show tonight. I don't know what to say. I hope she's all right. I hope she doesn't go back to Manila. I hope she can find peace. but there's one thing in her story that leaves me uneasy. She said she's been in Toronto for a year, but she also said she died in March 2022. And in the story, Mang Thomas told her it was August 2024. If she died in 2022, how could she be in Toronto now? Unless she never left Mang Thomas's shop. Unless she thinks she immigrated, started a new life. But in reality, she's still sitting there in the shop, eating noodles, reliving the same night forever. And was tonight's call real or just a part of that endless loop? I don't know. And I think that's the scariest thing. Not knowing if we're truly living or just imagining that we are. This is Morgan Hay, and you're listening to Late Night Radio Tales. The rain outside has softened, and in that silence, I wonder how many eateries like Mang Thomas's exist around the world. How many people are sitting in those shops, thinking they're just having dinner, not knowing that they no longer belong to this world? We'll take a short break, and then we'll continue with more stories. Stay with me, don't go anywhere, because the night is still long, and many more stories need to be told. Are you still there? Thank you. I know it's very late, or rather, very early, but give me a little more time. Because the next story is special to me in a different way. I usually don't tell my own stories on air. I'm the host, not the subject of the story, but tonight, I think I need to tell it. Because if I don't tell it now, perhaps I never will. This is my story, Morgan Hay, and it happened 5 years ago in 2019, before I moved to these Whispering Pines, before I started this radio show. Back then, I was 27, working for a radio station in Seattle. Life was stable, work was good, but I felt empty, as if I was living someone else's life. So that September, I took a 3-week leave of absence, bought a one-way ticket, and traveled alone. No plans, just wanted to go somewhere far, somewhere different. I chose Singapore. Singapore in September was hot and humid, but the city was beautiful, modern, clean, and orderly to the point of being almost surreal. Sparkling buildings, spotless streets, everything running like clockwork. I rented a small apartment in the Jailing area near the hawker centers. During the day, I explored, took photos, wrote my blog. At night, I ate at the hawker centers, trying all sorts of dishes: chicken rice, laksa, satay. I loved this food culture. Unlike fancy restaurants, the hawker centers had an authenticity, a sense of community. Everyone from workers to CEOs sat at the same plastic tables, eating the same delicious food at cheap prices. In my second week in Singapore, I discovered a special hawker center, Toa Payoh Lorong 8 Hawker Center, an old place dating back to the 70s. The first time I went at 9:00 p.m., it was packed. Dozens of stalls, hundreds of people eating, talking, laughing, fluorescent lights and aromas mingling. I walked along the stalls, eyeing the dishes, unable to decide what to eat. Then I saw a stall in the furthest corner, near the restrooms, near the trash cans, a small stall with no queue. While all the other stalls were bustling, this one was quiet. Its sign read, Uncle Tan's Wonton Noodles. Behind the counter was an old man, about 70, thin, with sparse white hair, wearing a white t-shirt dotted with grease. He sat on a plastic chair reading a newspaper, seeming to pay little attention to customers. I approached. "Excuse me, uncle, are you still open?" He looked up at me over his thick glasses, his face full of wrinkles but his eyes sharp. "You want to eat?" "Yes, a plate of wonton noodles, please." "Dry or soup?" "Dry, please." He nodded, turning to the kitchen. I sat at a table near the stall, waiting. While I waited, I observed Uncle Tan's stall. It was very old, peeling paint, rusty equipment, the wall behind stained with years of grease. But everything was clean. He wiped it meticulously, arranged it neatly. 5 minutes later, he brought out a plate of noodles. Yellow noodles, a few slices of char siu, some greens, green onions, a dark sauce. Beside it was a bowl of soup with 4 wontons. "Thank you, uncle." "Eat while it's hot," he said, then returned to his chair and continued reading his newspaper. I ate, and my God, it was the best I had ever eaten in Singapore. The noodles were perfectly chewy and soft, mixed with a sauce that was a perfect blend of sweet and savory, with a hint of smoky flavor. The char siu melted in my mouth. The wontons were fresh, filled with plump shrimp. "Uncle, this is really delicious," I said. "You like it?" "Very much, the best wonton noodles I've ever had." "I've been making this dish for 50 years, before you were even born." 50 years, you've been here all that time?" "Yes, my stall, I don't leave. open every day from morning till night, no holidays, no days off. Do you work alone? Yes, my wife passed away 10 years ago. My children all moved overseas. Now I'm alone, but I can't stop. If I stop, I won't know what to do, so I just keep going. I nodded, not knowing what else to say. After eating, I paid. Only 3 Singapore dollars, surprisingly cheap. I thanked Uncle and left. But for some reason, I felt sad. Sad for Uncle Tan. An old man, alone, working every day for 50 years, no breaks, no family by his side. I decided I would return. For the remaining nights in Singapore, I would go to his stall, eat noodles, and chat with him to make him less lonely, even for a moment. The next evening at 9:00 p.m. again. The hawker center was still busy, Uncle Tan's stall was still empty. He sat there, looking into the distance. Good evening, Uncle. Ah, you're back again. Yes, I'd like more wonton noodles. Good, I'll make it for you as before, dry noodles. Yes, please. He went into the kitchen, this time faster, more skilled. When he brought out the noodles, he sat down at the table opposite me. Can I sit, son? There are fewer customers now. Of course, Uncle, please. We chatted while I ate. He told me about old Singapore, the 60s and 70s, when the city was still poor and hawker centers were just starting out. When he was young, newly married, he opened the noodle stall with dreams of making a living. It was hard back then, he said. No money, worked tirelessly, but I was happy. Had a wife, had children, had dreams. Now I have money, but no wife, no children by my side, no more dreams, just work. You should retire, Uncle. You've done enough. Retire and do what? Sit at home watching TV, waiting to die? No, working is better, at least there's still a purpose. I understood and respected his choice. We talked until the hawker center emptied. At 11:00 p.m., most stalls closed. At 11:30 p.m., only a few remained. At 12:00 a.m., only Uncle Tan's stall. You close very late, Uncle. You always close last. I wait for the last customer, the very last customer. Oh, every night you wait until all the other stalls close. Then you wait for one more customer. Only after the last customer leaves do I close. Why, Uncle? He looked at me, his eyes holding something strange. Because I made a promise. A long, long time ago, I promised I would always wait for the last customer. A promise to whom? He didn't answer, just shook his head and stood up. It's late, you should go home. It's not safe alone at midnight. I nodded, paid, and left. Before leaving, I glanced back. Uncle Tan was still standing by his stall, looking out, waiting for the last customer. The 3rd, 4th, 5th nights, I still came, staying later each time, talking longer. And every night after I left, he still stayed, waiting for the last customer. Curiosity grew into anger. Why was he waiting? Who was the last customer? What promise? On the 6th night, I asked him directly, Uncle Tan, can I ask you something? Yes, ask away. Who is the last customer? Why do you always wait? He was silent for a very long time, then sighed. You really want to know? And he looked around the empty hawker center, only us remaining. He sat down opposite me. All right, I'll tell you, but you have to promise. Don't tell anyone, just between you and me. I promise. He took a deep breath. 40 years ago, I had a regular customer. A young man about 25. Every night after his shift, he would stop by around midnight. He worked the night shift at a factory, always ordered a dry wonton noodle with extra char siu. He was well-behaved, polite, always smiling. We became friends. He told me about his family, his girlfriend, his life. I often gave him extra portions, reduced the price. He was like a younger brother to me. Then one night he came completely different. Sad, silent. He ordered noodles but hardly ate. He just sat looking at me. I asked what was wrong. He said he owed money to gangsters, borrowed money because his mother was sick and needed surgery. Now he couldn't pay and the lenders threatened him, threatened his whole family. He said that night was the deadline, he had to pay tomorrow or they would harm his mother and his girlfriend. He said he didn't know what to do, he was so scared. He stopped, his eyes red-rimmed. I told him not to worry, I would help. I offered to lend him the money, but he refused. He said the amount was too large, he couldn't accept it from me. He finished eating, paid, and then said, Uncle Tan, thank you for always being kind to me. You're like family to me, I will never forget you. then he left. It was exactly midnight. The next morning, I heard the news that a body had been pulled from the Singapore River. A young man who had jumped from a bridge committed suicide. It was him. He wiped away tears. I was in pain and full of regret. I should have forced him to take the money. I should have helped more. But I didn't, and he died. From then on, I promised his spirit that every night I would wait for the last customer. Wait until midnight, the time he usually stopped by, and I would never refuse to serve anyone, no matter how late, how tired. Because who knows, maybe one night he would return. I want to be here to tell him I'm sorry. I should have helped more. I was stunned, my heart heavy. Uncle, you've waited 40 years. Yes, 40 years. Every night the same, but he never returned. Perhaps he has found peace, found tranquility. Maybe, he said, but I will still wait until I die. That's the punishment I inflict on myself for not helping him enough. That night I couldn't sleep. I thought about Uncle Tan, about his promise, about 40 years of waiting, and I thought about myself. The emptiness I carried, what was I looking for? Meaning, purpose. Uncle Tan had a purpose, even a sad one, but it was something to live for, to wait for. As for me, I was just drifting. My last night in Singapore, the night before my flight back to Seattle, I went again. I arrived later, after 11:00 p.m. The hawker center was almost empty, only Uncle Tan remained. Your last night, son, he smiled. You're leaving tomorrow, aren't you? Yes, Uncle, early flight. Then tonight is special. I'll make you the best portion. He went into the kitchen, the sound of the wok more lively than usual. 15 minutes later, he brought out the most beautiful plate of noodles I had ever seen. Perfect noodles, thick char siu, plump wontons, fresh green vegetables, even half a boiled egg. Uncle, this is too much. It's all right, you're a good friend. Eat. I ate each bite, and it was pure happiness. He sat opposite me, smiling as he watched me. You know, he said, you remind me of him. The way you talk, the way you listen, you're a good person. Thank you, Uncle. And you're a good person too. What happened to him wasn't your fault. You did your best. Maybe, he said softly, but I still feel guilty, so I wait. We talked until midnight. The clock hands touched 12:00. I was about to stand up and say goodbye. Uncle Tan suddenly looked towards the entrance. His face went pale. Uncle, what's wrong? He's here, he whispered. Who? The last customer, he's here. I turned. A young man about 25, dressed in worker's clothes, walked slowly into the hawker center. His face was sad. He walked straight to Uncle Tan's stall, sat down in silence. Uncle Tan stood up, trembling, and approached. You've returned, son, he choked out. Hello, Uncle Tan. It's been a long time. Yes, a very long time. 1 wonton noodle for me, dry with extra char siu as usual. Oh, of course. Uncle went into the kitchen, his hands trembling but working very carefully with all his heart. I sat still, not daring to move, not believing my eyes. The young man looked over at me. Hello, are you a friend of Uncle Tan? Yes, that's right. That's good, he needs friends. He's been lonely for too long. You're the one he's been waiting for. He nodded. I died 40 years ago, but my soul wasn't at peace because I felt guilty. I died because of my own weakness, and I left Uncle Tan with guilt. I didn't want that, so I stayed, wandering. But I couldn't reveal myself to him until he was ready to let go. Let go of what? Let go of guilt. He's a good man, too good. He blamed himself for my death, but it wasn't his fault, it was mine, and I needed to tell him that. Uncle Tan brought the plate of noodles and placed it in front of the young man, his hands still trembling. Here are your noodles, son. He looked at the plate and smiled. Perfect, just as I remember. But he didn't eat, he just looked at Uncle Tan. Uncle, tonight I've returned to say one thing, something I should have said 40 years ago. What is it, son? Thank you for being kind to me. Thank you for treating me like family. You did more for me than anyone else. You gave me a place to feel welcomed, someone to talk to. My death wasn't your fault, it was mine, and I'm sorry for making you wait so long. Uncle Tan cried, tears streaming down. No, I should have helped you more, I should have. You helped enough, the young man said, his voice even softer than Uncle Tan's. More than you think. Now it's time for both of us to move on. I have to go, and you, uncle, you need to rest. You've waited long enough. You kept your promise. Now you can let go. Uncle slumped into his chair, sobbing. The young man stood up, placed a hand on his shoulder, a light, warm touch. Goodbye, Uncle Tan. Thank you for everything. Rest in peace. He turned to me. Please take care of him. He's a good man. I nodded, speechless. He smiled, turned, and walked out of the hawker center, stepping into the darkness and dissolving like smoke in the wind. We sat for a very long time, not speaking. In front of us was the untouched plate of noodles. Finally, Uncle wiped his tears and stood up. I think I'll close the stall tonight, and perhaps forever. You're going to retire. Yes, it's time to rest. He was right, I've waited long enough. He cleaned up, turned off the stove, wiped everything down. I helped him. Everything was spotless. He locked the stall for the last time. Thank you, son, he said, for being here, for listening, for being a friend. Thank you, Uncle, for the best noodles, and for teaching me about loyalty, about kindness, about keeping a promise. We shook hands, then he walked one way, I walked another. That was the last time I saw Uncle Tan. The next month, I returned to Seattle. I looked for news about Uncle Tan. The hawker center management said his stall had closed. He had retired, they didn't know where he was. I searched social media, local newspapers, and I found a small article in the Straits Times. Mr. Tan Wing, 72, owner of a wonton noodle stall at Toa, passed away peacefully in his sleep at his residence. He was discovered by neighbors with a smile on his face. Family members returned from overseas for the funeral. People said he lived a dedicated life and finally found his rest. Found his rest. I thought about that night, about the young man, about the 40-year promise. I realized that sometimes we carry pain and guilt for too long, waiting for forgiveness, waiting to be released. But often, that forgiveness must come from within ourselves. Uncle Tan waited for his young friend's forgiveness, but the truth was, his friend never blamed him. Uncle blamed himself. Only when he heard the words from the deceased was he able to allow himself to rest in peace. That story changed me. It made me understand that living isn't just for oneself, but also about living with meaning, with purpose, with people to love and care for. 6 months after my trip to Singapore, I left my job in Seattle. I moved to the Whispering Pines forest. I opened a small studio and started late-night radio tales. Not to be famous or to make money, but to do what Uncle Tan did, wait for the last customer. To be there for those who need a place to tell their stories, a voice to listen. Every night as I sit in this small studio, listening to stories from all over the world, I think of Uncle Tan, and I hope that he and his young friend have both truly found peace. Stay with me a little longer. There's one more story, the final story of tonight, about the boundary between life and death, between forgiveness and regret, between letting go and holding on. I know it's late. We've reached the end of tonight, and this last letter is quite special too. The subject line reads, "Please read immediately. They are getting closer." There's no sender's name, just a strange email address. I opened the email and I saw a frantic, hastily typed message, full of typos, as if the writer was in a panic. But the story compelled me to read it aloud to you right now. This is an email from someone who calls themselves. Actually, there's no name. They just wrote, "I have forgotten my name, but I remember the story." Dear Morgan, hey. I don't know if you'll receive this email. I don't know if I have time to send it, but I have to try. Because if I don't tell anyone, no one will know about us, about the people who were lost in that restaurant. I don't remember my name anymore. I try to remember. But every time I try, it fades like mist dissolving in the sun. I think my name starts with an L. Linda, Lisa, Lily. I don't know. I think I'm 31 or 32 or 33. The memory of age is also fading, but I remember the restaurant. I remember it very clearly. It's in Taipei, Taiwan, in a small alley in the Wanhua district, the oldest part of the city. No name, no sign. Just a small shop with a few red plastic tables, a few blue plastic chairs, and an old woman selling food. I found that shop one night last May. I was in Taipei for work for some company. I don't remember anymore. I was staying at a hotel near the Shilin night market. One night after working late, I went for a walk to find a late-night meal. I wandered into the Wanhua district. This area was old, dark, with few tourists, many old people, many ancient houses, many small temples, and smells the smell of incense, the smell of dampness, the smell of time. I walked into an alley and I saw a dim light. A small eatery was still open, even though it was almost midnight. An old woman sat on a plastic chair, fanning herself with a paper fan. She was very old, perhaps 80 or 90, with white hair, a hunched back, wrinkled skin, wearing an old white shirt and black pants. I approached, speaking in English mixed with a few Chinese words I knew. "Hello, are you still serving?" She looked at me, nodded, and pointed to a table. I sat down. She stood up with difficulty and walked to the back where there was a gas stove and a few old pots. There was no menu. I didn't know what this shop sold, but I was hungry, so I waited. 5 minutes later, she brought me a bowl of soup. The soup was cloudy brown with meat, vegetables, and mushrooms. It smelled wonderfully rich. I said, "Thank you, how much?" She shook her head, said nothing, just pointed to the bowl of soup, signaling for me to eat. I began to eat, and oh my God, it was delicious. The broth was rich in flavor, the meat tender, the vegetables fresh. There was a special taste I couldn't quite identify. Not entirely beef, not entirely pork, not entirely chicken, but delicious. As I ate, I looked around the very old shop. The paint on the walls was peeling, the ceiling was black from years of soot, the floor was cracked. On the walls hung old black and white photos of people in 40s and 50s attire. They stood in front of the shop, not smiling. And I noticed something strange. In all the photos, the people's faces were blurred, as if someone had deliberately erased them. I was about to ask the old woman about it, but when I turned, she was already sitting back in her chair, fanning herself, looking out at the alley with a distant gaze. I finished eating, stood up intending to pay, but she shook her head again, just waved her hand, signaling for me to go. I thanked her and left the shop, feeling full and warm. But when I got back to the hotel, I started to feel strange, a little dizzy, my stomach uncomfortable. I thought it was probably just fatigue, so I went asleep. But that night I dreamt. I was standing in that restaurant, but the shop was no longer old. It was new, clean, filled with light. And there were many people, dozens of people eating, drinking, talking, laughing, but there was no sound. All of them opened their mouths as if speaking, but there was no sound. They laughed, but there was no laughter, only absolute silence. And then I realized they had no faces. Like in the photos where their faces should be, there was only a blurry area, featureless. I woke up drenched in sweat. The next morning, I tried to find that shop again. I went into the Wanhua district, into the same alley as yesterday, but I couldn't find it. There were only old houses, closed, no eateries at all. I asked an old woman selling fruit nearby. I described the shop, described the old woman. The old woman looked at me with a strange expression. She spoke in Chinese. Fortunately, I have a translation. She said, "There's no such shop here now, but there was an old shop from before the war. The owner was killed in 1947 during the 228 crackdown. Her whole family, 5 people, were all killed. They were accused of being rebels. After that, no one dared to open a shop there again. People say the place is cursed." I asked what the 228 crackdown was. The old woman didn't want to say more, just shook her head and turned away. I went back to my hotel and searched online, and I learned that the 228 incident was a tragedy that occurred in Taiwan in 1947. The government suppressed civilian protests. Thousands of people were killed. What followed were decades of white terror. People were arrested, tortured, and killed for being suspected communists or rebels, and many of them disappeared. No bodies, no graves, no one knew where they died, where they were buried. They became nameless people, erased from history. That night I saw the shop again. I hadn't intended to look for it. I was just walking after dinner, and suddenly I found myself standing in front of that shop in that alley with the old woman sitting on her plastic chair, fanning herself with a paper fan as if the shop itself had sought me out. This time I was scared. I was about to turn away, but the old woman saw me and waved me back. My feet automatically moved towards the shop. I couldn't control them. I sat down. She brought me another bowl of soup. This time I didn't want to eat, but the aroma was too strong, too enticing. My hand automatically picked up the spoon and brought the soup to my mouth, and as I ate, I started to see. I saw the other people in the shop sitting at the tables. They had no faces. Where their faces should be, there was only a blurry area as if erased. They sat silently, looking at me, and I heard voices not with my ears, but in my head. "Hello, sister, you're here too." "Welcome, sister." I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My mouth felt glued shut. The old woman sat down at the table opposite me. For the first time she spoke, her voice hoarse, as if unused for a long time. "You've eaten twice. One more time and you will become one of us." I shook my head wildly. She continued, "We are the forgotten, unjustly killed, nameless, with no graves, no one to pray for us, no one to remember. We cannot leave. We are trapped here in this shop where we once had names, once had lives, but day by day we fade. We forget our names, forget our faces, forget everything. Except the hunger to be remembered, to exist. And you are young, you have memories, you have vitality. When you eat our soup, we take a little from you, a little memory, a little name, a little identity. 3 times, eat 3 times, and you will have nothing left. You will become one of us, nameless, faceless, without memories, only a hungry ghost." I stood up and ran out of the shop. This time, I managed to run. I ran without stopping, ran out of the alley, ran towards the main road, and I screamed my name. My name is, but I couldn't remember. My name had vanished from my memory. That was 3 months ago. Since then, I've tried to live a normal life. I returned to my country, I think it's America or Canada, I don't remember clearly. I try to work, but I don't remember what my job is. Every day I forget a little more friends' names, family names, home address, birthday. I look in the mirror and my face is increasingly blurry, not completely gone, but less sharp, as if slowly being erased. And every night I dream of the shop, dream of the old woman, dream of the faceless people. They call me, come back to us just one more time. Then you won't have to suffer anymore, you'll forget everything, you'll be at peace. And I'm scared. I'm scared that one day I won't be able to resist. I'll go back, I'll eat the 3rd bowl of soup, and I'll disappear completely. I'm writing this email to have proof, so that when I disappear, at least someone will know, someone will remember. Even just a little. If you go to Taipei, to the Wanhua district, and you see a small eatery in a dark alley with an old woman fanning herself with a paper fan, please don't go in. Don't eat their soup. No matter how delicious it looks, don't eat it. Because once you eat, they will take a part of your name, your face, your memories, and eventually, you will become one of the nameless. Morgan, they're knocking on the door. I hear the old woman's voice outside. She says, "It's time, come home." And I feel a part of me wants to open the door, wants to follow, because at least there, I won't be alone. There are people like me, people who have lost their names. If I don't send another email, it means I'm gone. And please remember just once that there was a person whose name started with L, who lived, who existed, and who had a story. Please remember us, the nameless. That was the email I tried to reply to. But the email bounced back, the address no longer existed. I searched online for missing people in Taipei 3 months ago. I found a few news reports. A foreign woman about 30, working for a tech company, had gone missing without a trace. Police were investigating, family was searching, but there were no leads. And in a forum about haunted places in Taiwan, I found an old post. In Wanhua, there's a strange eatery, only appearing at night. The food is good, but don't eat it more than once. A friend of mine ate it 3 times and disappeared. They found him 3 months later, wandering the streets, not remembering his name, not recognizing his family. He just kept saying, I forgot my name." The 228 incident, the white terror historical tragedies that we often forget. People who were killed, tortured, erased from records. They became numbers, and then not even numbers, just forgot. And perhaps those souls are still wandering, still hungry not for food, but for remembrance, to be known, to exist. And they take from the living, take their names, their faces, their memories, so they can feel like they are still there. I don't know where the author of that email is now. I don't know if they still have their name, or if they have become one of the faceless, sitting in that dark shop, hungry for existence. But I know one thing, I will remember. Even if it's just me, even if I don't know their names, I will remember that they once existed. They had a story, and that story deserves to be told. This is Morgan Hay. I wish you all a good night's sleep.